It's time for Mama Bear Donita on the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast. Welcome to the Sharing Den, where we share cancer stories, products, and information to support anyone going through the journey. We will be there for you. We will be there with you. Now, welcome Mama Bear Donita.
Hi, this is Mama Bear Donita, and you are listening to the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Ear Network family. My podcasts are also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Miami Community Radio, Fort Lauderdale Community Radio, the SOB Network. And today I want to welcome me. I'm going to talk today about fear. I talked a few months ago about fear, but I wanted to come back and finish my thought process on that because I feel like it's probably one of the biggest obstacles that survivors face. So what is fear? There's so many answers to that, but for today, I want to concentrate on fear being the inability to control a situation or be in control of the situation, and will I get hurt? For me, the greatest fear was realized when I was standing on the beach, looking at the clear Caribbean waters that surround Hollywood, Florida. And it's those green turquoise blues that allow you to feel calm and empowered, the place where you naturally breathe and the smile and your body lets itself relax. It was my most favorite place in the entire world that I received the news that I had cancer. Not just regular cancer, but triple negative breast cancer. And I had a 1% chance of living. Quickly, I went from a place of happiness to a place of uncharted fear, and I was instantly thrown into the cancer vortex. I could literally feel the light and love of my favorite spot turning dark, black, and very stormy. The world had been ripped out from underneath me, kind of like quicksand, and I knew that, and I understood that everything I had counted on in the past was gone, and it was all in the instant that I got a phone call and I heard the words, your biopsy came back positive for cancer. My biggest fear realized I had come in contact with a true life or death sentence. And it was at that point that I went down a very negative path. And I realized that while my mind was turning so dark and I was so scared and I had been given the 1% chance of living, that was not a statistic that was new to me. My entire life, since I was a very small child, I've always been that 1%, whatever it was, good, bad, lucky, unlucky. I win a lot of things from raffles. I win a lot of 1% medical conditions. I've had a dura explode on me. I spent 12 days in the hospital on Dilaudid, which is super duper strong. You don't want to be on that. And then I just took myself off of it. All of these things that I have invoked so much fear in me until I got that one call that said, I know your whole life you've been the 1%, but this time you're really the 1%, and it's not looking good. And I thought, this is not a way for me to live. I wanted to live. So my first suggestion for fear, and what I'm talking about today is basically taking your life lessons and using them to propel yourself into being able to manage fear. I said control fear, and a friend of mine said, you can't control fear. And I was like, but you can. And they were like, no, you can't. I thought to myself, well, okay, maybe you can't. Maybe I'm not using the right word. Manage fear. And so I find I have about 8 little tips. And the first one is to stay positive. It is so easy to go negative for me and complain and be sad and be like, why me? Why did this happen to me? My kids are so young. I'm going to miss stuff. And obviously 10 years later, it didn't happen because I'm 3 cancers in 10 years. I'm still here. So I decided after much kicking and screaming and refusing that the positive route was actually the way to go, that I should have actually embraced that a little bit longer or earlier. It's vital. You breathe, meditate, do yoga, prescribe. I always say prescribe instead of subscribe. I never get those straight. Subscribe to apps. There's so many emails. You can get the Daily Ohm. You can get Toots encouraging words, or I can't remember exactly what it's called. But every day I open my email and I have like 122 emails, and 80 of them are, I don't know, whatever, somebody's on sale. And then the rest are all motivational. And do I read them all every day? No, that's way too overwhelming. But what I do is I pick one or two and I really focus on what they say. And I try to let my mind stay in a positive place, because I found it is so much easier to be positive than it is to fight being positive. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion for fear, it comes in the word lesson. Lesson is just a really, like, when I hear the word lesson, my body goes, oh, why those words? What thing is about to happen to me that I need to sit up, pay attention, and understand that there's a lesson coming? Well, I want to take the word lesson and let's turn it into the obvious two words of less on. So if you're taking a lesson and you say, I had a lesson on taking the SAT, or I had a lesson on marriage, or I have a lesson that I learned about caregiving. But if you change those words and you said, I had less on taking the SAT, I had less on caregiving, I had less on, death of a parent. That sounds so much easier to take than the word lesson. So separate the words and just make it a little more approachable, baby steps. Like lesson seems like a big wall. Less on seems a little bit more steppy. So see what you can do with that. And then I love this. This is something that I thought of, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who thought of it, but I like to think that I might be the one person who wrote it down. Probably not. I didn't Google it. I probably should. What I call a fake fear, an illogical, logical fear. And for me, that is sharks. I grew up in the desert. I did not swim in the ocean. I am terrified of sharks. And I was in third grade or fourth grade when Jaws came out, which was a really big deal. I know it doesn't seem like that great of a movie now, but it was really scary for our time. I actually was terrified. I spilled my popcorn. It scared me to death. And again, I grew up in the desert. And then when I wasn't in the desert, I was not in the ocean. I was in like Lake Tahoe or Lake whatever, or Lake. Well, back when I was in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, I didn't have, there weren't sharks that were swimming in freshwater. I understand that bull sharks have made their way up to freshwater now, but they weren't there when I was there. And so sharks was not anything I ever came in contact with. So when we moved to Florida and we're here, the first Mother's Day we're here, my husband coaxed me out to the sandbar, and it's the beach, the where you get in, and then there's like a deep part and then the sandbar. So we're like swimming over to the sandbar, and it was Mother's Day, so I probably had like a mimosa or something like that where I was feeling a little less fearful. And we get out of the sandbar, and sure enough, a shark swims right by us. And he's like, no, sharks can't come out here. And I was like, yeah, no, I feel like a shark might be near. And he's like, no, I think you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And sure enough, the shark was right there. So you want to talk about walk on water. I got back to the shore faster than any human has ever gotten back to the shore. And that is my illogical, logical fear. Everybody has one. You're afraid of snakes or spiders or clowns or earthquakes or, whatever it is that you're afraid of. And it's something you can't control. And you're not going to go running around in a pit of snakes to face your fear. Allow yourself that one illogical, logical fear. I mean, just release yourself from being worried about that one. That's a freebie. And then everybody goes through fight versus flight, and it differs per situation. I was a fighter when I had cancer every time. All 3 times, like 3.5 times, I have been there, fought it, and had positive thoughts and been like, this is fine. I can tackle it. It's not a big deal. Past my breast cancer. I mean, I did have to conquer breast cancer first, but I fight with my diagnoses. But when it came time to the very end of caregiving, when my mother-in-law was passing, I flighted and I was out that door and I could not come back in for anything. But what I'm pointing out is that I don't want you to judge yourself for fight or flight. If your body does what innately works for you at that moment in time, and you don't really have any control over that. So again, a couple of ways to give yourself some passes and not be so hard on yourself. Recognize the fight versus flight and go with whatever your body does. Don't fight it. And give yourself the pass on the illogical, logical fear. And while you're doing that, another way to do this is to use time. We are so caught up in a time fast forward. We do everything so fast in the United States. We were talking in my business course last night. We were talking about Canada versus the United States and the pace difference and how frustrating it is sometimes to go to another country with a different pace level. And I started thinking about this and I was like, we force deadlines on ourselves. And if you've been given a cancer diagnosis and you're in that cancer vortex and you're very scared and you don't know what's going to happen, you're waiting on your diagnosis, you're waiting on your plan, you're waiting on getting started, the anxiety and the fear that creeps in at that point, I would allow yourself to not hurt. I mean, they found the cancer. It's already at the pace it's going. If they say to you, if we don't operate tomorrow, you will die, well, then probably you need to operate tomorrow. But if they say, we're going to get back to you in a couple of weeks with a plan and everything, and there's always a sense of urgency, but sometimes it seems to take a little longer than you think it should, use that time to journal, to record your thoughts on a regular basis. Just auto write. Sit down and write what's on your mind. Don't try to make sense of it. Don't try to do anything with it. Just sit down and start writing. And use the time. Use the time to process your thoughts. Use the time to go through the process of accepting, analyzing, recording, things like that. Just take your time. Use the sense of urgency to not make you speed to make a decision because you're afraid. Use the sense of urgency as a catalyst to be able to record and digest your thoughts and have a clear thought process of where you want to go, because it's going to happen really fast and you're going to really need to know. And then fear creeps in because some people second guess themselves. So while you're using the time, another thing to use is pulverize. Break the information. Find your fear. And when you're using the time and you've eliminated fight versus flight, you've eliminated fake fears, you've rephrased it towards a positive state of mind with lessons, you're being positive, you've taken some time. Now take the information that you've done around that fear and just pulverize to pieces. Like, I am afraid of sharks. Why am I afraid of sharks? I'm afraid of sharks because of these reasons. I saw Jaws when I was younger. I grew up in the desert. I'm a really good swimmer. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. So, these are what I'm saying. You pulverize details so that you understand the fear, so that you have a very good understanding of the fear, which leads right into my next suggestion is knowledge. Use knowledge. Do not Google all the horrific things that could possibly happen, because it's very interesting how that pops up first on Google. Do not do that. You can go too far with this. Just go to the edge and then come back. Use knowledge. Look up all the words you don't understand. Try and understand all the words you don't understand. If you have a question, write it down. Ask many people. Ask people who've been through it. Ask survivors. Ask the doctor. Ask the nurse. Ask your friend. Ask whoever. Ask a counselor. Ask a therapist. Ask your team, your oncology team, for a therapist or a coach. You need that. It's part of your team. I think a lot of people do it now, the medical field. But I use knowledge. So for an example, when I use knowledge was when my child was diagnosed with a childhood disease. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And this was pre-Google and everything else. So, I mean, we're talking, I had to go to the library and get a book, read it, and, all these things. So information was gathered a lot slower back before the internet. I know I sound like a dinosaur, but I'm just saying it was. And there was something not wrong about that. So just remember that time pressure. Everything is so urgent. It doesn't have to be that urgent. I mean, cancer it grows fast, but it's not going to grow. If you don't make a decision overnight, it's not going to. It's okay. It's okay. So in addition to finding out the right kind of knowledge, not fearful knowledge, don't add to your fear, but the kind of knowledge that clarifies things. And you have to be a grown-up and decide what clarifies things and what doesn't. You can't put that on somebody else's plate. This part of your diagnosis is going to be some deep diving inside and finding out, kind of what happened with your mental state during the original diagnosis and things like that. I mean, you really need to dig deep to do these fears. This is not a casual thing. I probably should have said that up front. This is a deep, deep digging. And then use trial and error. You know,